So what vehicles are you going to be using for the Summer Quest event coming up in just 2 days? Good evening. I'm Old Dead Man, your host. We're kind of taking a quick look at what kind of lineups we might use for the Summer Quest event coming up. By the way, let me know which lineups you like in the comments below. I'd be curious to see if we have some that are even better than the ones I'm listing here. Very much a high possibility. A couple of things to remember. First off, we're going to start off with the air vehicles in each of the nations, and then we're going to go over to the ground vehicles second. I do play realistic, so it will be air RB and ground RB as my primary focus points. And I do have a few thoughts before we get started about, how we're going to tackle the event itself. Numero uno, the points do in fact matter. This is not whose line is it anyway. So you need to play lineups that are going to be netting you those points. Number two, winning brings more points. Thank you. Yes, I am trying out for Captain Obvious. But three, losing, but getting huge frag counts gets more points than winning, but leaving the match after, say, one death. Numero four, this one's an important one. Play vehicles you enjoy. Even if you're getting a little less points, if you enjoy the experience, you're going to be able to go the distance. If you don't play vehicles you enjoy, you will definitely not be enjoying this event. Number five, play multiple nations at different BR points. And this one's also important. If you play just your personal favorite, whatever it is, you're going to find that you're going to get burned out. And you won't like to play that vehicle for a while, sometimes a long while. So make certain you have good vehicles you enjoy in multiple nations at multiple BR points. Number six, don't forget the event vehicles. That'll give you some opportunities for some variety. So if you've got previous event vehicles, then you might find that you can drop down to even BR, low ranks, rank 1, rank 2, and still have some fun because you're playing a vehicle that's different than what you would normally use. Number seven, decide how you are going to get your points. Then use vehicles that are tailored to those tasks. For instance, if you're going to be capturing points to get your points, well, you're going to want fast, agile vehicles that can make it to the points well before anybody else does. And in fact, you want to be able to get from that point to the next point, usually by the time the enemy team is getting to the first point. So keep that in mind. If you are ground pounding, make certain you bring an appropriately fast and well-loaded aircraft for that task so you can make it there in time. And if you're fighting it out with other players, well, be in the right bird. And number eight, a fast vehicle that gets its points early in the match and dies may be more efficient at getting you points than a slower vehicle and playing out the entire match. I'm not condoning first death leaving here. But for instance, in Air RB, if you dive in with an airplane that's got a whole bunch of bombs and rockets, wipe out an entire enemy column, then you may come out with more points, even though a fighter is going to surely come in and wipe the floor with you, than if you spend a bunch of time climbing up in the air, try and dogfight some things, maybe get a kill or two. You may find that your points total is actually worse off for that in that particular case. So keep that in mind. All right, let's move on to the vehicles. Now, I'm going to not recommend, but these are the vehicles I'm looking at for playing this particular event. Starting off with the US of A. Now, there's a few options here, but I particularly caught note that there's an event vehicle from the summer 2017. This is the P43A1, and it's a nice low 2.7 BR. Yes, you're not quite into these clubbing newbies there. We're not seal clubbing right here, but it's just high enough that you're out of that range, and you are still low enough where you're probably going to be the most experienced player on the team, on both teams, really. Plus, the P43 has got good speed, good turn. It's just good all-around aircraft. But for the more standard vehicles, for your ground pounding delectability, I'm thinking the P47D25. Lots of bombs, lots of rockets, reasonably fast, good airplane. And when you get done pounding on targets, ground targets, you can turn around and try and take out some enemy fighters. You're not defenseless like some of the options are. Then, if you want to go up in BR a little bit, which gets you there a little faster, you might look at the Sky Raiders, and I'm particularly thinking of the 82. This guy right here is just perfectly placed to avoid nearly all the jets, and yet is still fast enough and capable enough to take out a whole bunch of ground targets and even possibly out dogfight some of those cocky fighter pilots. Speaking of cocky fighter pilots, if you are one and you aren't feeling the normal fighters, you might look at the SB2C 1C or 4. I would be looking at the SB2C 4 because you can take a couple of gun pods on it. You have more ordnance options and you have all the benefits of that high bomber spawn, so you can be diving on enemy fighters and attackers and bombers from nice and high up and really clean up the skies. If that kind of work isn't your kettle of fish, then you should pick between the F8F1B and the P51H5NA. Both of these are good top-notch fighters, but I would actually pick the F8F1B over the P51 because it has 20 millimeter cannons and they wreck enemy fighters. So that's my recommendations there for the American tree for Air RB. Moving on to Germany, I really only have one suggestion here. Now, okay, two suggestions. First one is the BF109G2 Trop. This is a good combination of a good BR 4.3, good firepower. It's got a 20 millimeter cannon and a couple of 30 calibers, and it carries a bomb. So you got a lot of good all around capabilities, plus a good turn time of 19 seconds. All around good choice for taking on the air superiority with a little bit of light ground attack attached. But if you're a little bit, a little bit more willing to jump into the real deep into the pool, look over the Arados. I would take either one of these for the ground pounding role. But if you want something that's going to be able to defend itself and get back out of the trouble a little bit better, the C3 is the way to go. It's got forward facing guns and carries the 3-bomb option. The B2 is great because you're going to be doing that mostly in areas where the planes can't catch you. But I'm expecting a lot of people to be at that BR as well, looking for people like this. But either way, Arado, great for the ground pounding option. Moving on to Russia. There's a couple of ones here that are really good as well. And since we got to be rank 3, I'm looking at the PE3 BIS. This has got bombs, it's got rockets, it's got 20 millimeter cannons, it's got 50 caliber machine guns. It's got a little bit of everything, plus it's got turrets. All in all, you've got a good package to be able to deliver some pain to those ground targets. My next choice is any of the IL-2s, but if you're looking for lower BR, the 2-37 is an excellent option. And to be honest, the IL-2s are decent at maybe taking on those cocky fighter pilots too, depending on how good you are. As far as I would be remiss if I didn't mention the PE8 is the king of this particular type of task. You can fly over there, drop your bombs on bases, and then as you're leaving, you can be shooting up the enemy aircraft with your 20 millimeter tail gun. It's an effective piece of hardware. So those are the 3 right there that are primary on the ground attack section. But if you're looking for a little fighter action, Yak 9T is, I think, in a primo position at 4.0. You have pretty much good turn time, good speed, very good maneuverability, and this is a fighter that will really clean up the skies. You got to fly it right, of course, but still. In Great Britain, this was probably one of the easier ones to look at. For fighter air superiority, look no farther than the Mark V, any of them. The Spitfire Mark 5B Trop is good at 3.7, the 5B at 4.0. You can look at the 5C Trop with 4 20-millimeter guns, or the 5C itself also with 4, but it's at 5.0. And that's starting to get to where you're going to be struggling just a little bit on the speed. You can always go for the Spitfire F Mark 9 if you are really feeling that turny-burny action. Good plane, very effective. But let's say you want to do a little ground attack. Well, you know what? The Brigand B1 is definitely your kettle of fish. It carries about 4 bombs, as I recall, a couple of 1,000 pounders and a couple of 500s. Has forward facing 20 millimeter guns. It's fast, so you can dive in on your ground targets, drop your bombs, and get out of there. The only downside is it doesn't pull out of dives well. So you're going to be doing almost level bombing to be able to hit your targets. Otherwise, you're going to discover that the ground is a lot higher than you remembered it being. Good aircrafts. Over in Japan, oh my heavens, for the air superiority role, we're going old school here. The Ki 43-3 Atsu, excellent aircraft. It turns, it fights, it shoots, it's decently fast. It's at 4.0, which puts you in a great position. And overall, you just cannot get much better than that for the air superiority role. Don't get in front of enemy guns, though. It doesn't go out when you get it lit. As far as the ground attack role goes, I'm also going to pull a page out of the Germany lineup. I'm dropping down to the R2Y2s, any of them. They all have guns, they all have bombs, and you're fast enough that you can dive in there, get your business done, and be heading away and potentially take out some more ground targets on the way. Also, it's agile enough that you can take on some jet fighters if you have to. Not necessarily the best at it, but you get the air spawn. You can play it as a fighter the whole time if you need to. China was a tough one for me. I prefer to recommend indigenous vehicles for a country if I'm for these types of things. But this one doesn't really have any, at least in the areas I can work with. My understanding is some of the jets down lower are pretty good, but I don't know the win rates on them because I don't have them. For the ground pounding role, look at the P-47 D23RA. It's a better BR than the P-47s in the U.S. tree, has nearly as much ordnance, capable, fast, all good things. You might look at that for the ground pounding role. But air superiority gets into a really interesting spot. You have a rank 3 I-16 Type 17. Not fast, but it turns, and it turns better than many biplanes. So this is your option, and it's at 3.0. So you should be able to take out some pretty good stuff with those 220 millimeters with its backup 30 calibers. Also, it carries a couple of 100-pound bombs. Not really what I'd expect for a really big, making good target practice, but, good plane. That's what I'm thinking for the Chinese tree. Over in Italy, I also had some real issues. I didn't really get the feel for it. But in the end, I thought we'd do a combined combination here and suggest either the SM-91 or the SM-92, depending on which one you like better. They're both good airplanes. They both carry bombs. I think the SM-92 actually carries bigger bombs than the 91. Yes. So even better for ground attack, but it still has those 320 millimeter cannons and a set of 50 cals. It'll tear up anything in a head on. So keep that in mind as a real possibility if that's your Italian tree. I don't really have a favorite for the air superiority role. They're all good aircraft, but none of them stand out to me in my opinion. And I've not really gotten far enough down to get the good stuff. But I've heard the Sagittario 2 is still a good aircraft despite being at 9.0. So maybe you ought to try that one out if you've got that jet. France has a similar problem as China. There's not a whole lot of indigenous designs to really recommend it. The jets, though, do have something really interesting. The Voitures, the 2B and the 2A, they're both at 9.0, and the 2A has forward-mounted guns. So I would think that this would be a great option, and I've seen it work to great effect. So from the experience of being on the wrong end of the guns, I think this is a good option for the ground pounding role. Air superiority, you're pretty much looking at US-based fighters. None of them that jump out at me as really exciting, but let me know what you think in the comments. Is there a good Frenchie out there that I'm missing? Sweden's another strange one from this perspective. As the one that really caught my eye, though, is the A21A3. good BR, good armaments, good bomb, good dual purpose airplane. It'll be able to take on most anything and win, especially with a good pilot. No dedicated fighter really jumped out at me. The SK-60B and the Saab 105G are both good options, even though they're more strike aircraft than fighters. But the SK-60B, as I recall, when I test drove it in the before, is really a good turner. So it might be a really good option for those that are looking for some, air action there. And finally, I can make no recommendations on Israel. I just don't have it far enough down, and I don't have enough experience with its aircraft. A lot of them are just copy paste from other trees. So I would not take the S-199 into any air situation at all. But the Spitfire Mark 9 Charlie, good aircraft, and I believe it even has bombs, so you can use it as a dual purpose. Nothing else that I know of. You can probably get away with the Voitures again. But again, I don't have any specific recommendations. Let's move on to the ground RB trees. And I've got several recommendations for the US lineup. Remembering that I'm not putting airplanes in because I don't believe that the airplanes are going to have their points count. But we'll find out when it hits. The M4A176W really leads out this lineup right here at 4.7. Good tank, good gun, and at this BR range, you're not going to face anything you can't kill with the 76. Then you got some 75 millimeter armed vehicles. The T-14 I picked up out of a Warbond shop, and the M4A2, just a good overall tank. 75 millimeter doesn't get any less effective at this point, but it is still just a 75. You're going to have to flank most targets. Then you have the M42 and the M19, giving you basically mobile tank destroyers that you can use on the ground and still have anti-air capabilities. This whole lineup tops out at 4.7. Excellent lineup. The next one I'd be looking at is a 5.7 lineup here. M18, M36, M4A3 76W, and of course an M42. You can toss in some lower BR tanks right in this same area and lose absolutely nothing, but still have a tremendously effective lineup. And finally, I have a great win rate at the 6.7 region of the US tree, mainly because I love the M50 and the M56. Lots of fun, fast, agile. The M50 is like carrying a 6-gun to a bolt-action rifle fight. Lots of fun, absolutely a blast. Then you can back it up with a T-34, a T-2065, T-2061-1, or even another light tank, a T-92, or even more. Lots of fun, lots of wins. Good area. And that's it for the U.S., at least from my recommendations, except for one thing, and that is the M3A3 Bradley. My win rate on this, even though it's not been spaded, is very good. And since I haven't spaded it yet, that clearly means that area is winning fairly regularly for the U.S. tree, because I'm certainly not carrying the games with it. So that's a good possibility. Let me know what you think of that one as well. Over in Germany, I have to go straight to the 5.3 lineup. You have a Panther, you have a Tiger, you got two AA guns that are right there, Ostwind 2, Wirbelwind. You can even do the Ostwind 1 if you prefer. I've got some event vehicles that I've acquired over time in this lineup, but it's not required because they still have more vehicles that are in this same range, a Nashorn, a Panzer 470 that can fill those slots. So very good lineup at 5.3 for the Germans. Russia is a kind of a tough one for me. They do have some pretty successful matches around the IS-2, which I think is in the 6.3 range. And they've got some good heavies, but I'm not a heavy player as far as the heavy tanks go. I do, however, have this fun event vehicle, the BT-7A F-32 at 3.7, and then I get a good 4.3 lineup with the SU-152 and ASU-57, plus this SU-85A to round out the lineup. Plus, we got the ZSU-37 at rank 4 and the ZIS-43 at rank 3. So we have AA guns for days. We got all kinds of good stuff. If you don't have these premium or event vehicles, they've got some great heavy tanks right in this area. KV-1 ZIS-5. We've got the SU-85 as well. Lots of great vehicles right here in this 4.3 range for you to make a really effective lineup. The Brits were a much harder one for me to decide on. Now, mine gets into my tree there, gets around the 8.0 range. And for a while, I tried to assemble a lineup around the Falcon with follow ons at 7.7, but I just couldn't seem to get good matches with it when I was doing my test runs. So I thought it over and I figured that the best options were the Charioteer at 6.3, followed by the Centurion Mark 1, the Challenger and the Comet, and a Crusader AA behind it. Now, I do love the Carnarvon, and it's a really great tank, as well as the FV 4202. But they're up there at the 7.0 range, 7.7, 7.3 range, and it starts getting real tough again right there for the Brits. But I do find the Charioteer is a great middle ground, and it does a good job. Now, this one's a really weird lineup entirely. I based my lineup here on the M24, which is still rank 3 in the current lineups. So the M24 leads me off, and I've got the Chinu 2, which is a premium, but we still have an M19A1 and the NATO. So you can have an entirely 4.0 and below lineup without the Chinu 2, 3 tanks, throw some backups on it, and you're kicking butt for days. Lots of fun. Good place to be. It's low enough that you've got a much better skill arrangement for, those of us who are a little bit less robust on tanks, maybe sometimes. But a lot of fun right there. And if you have the Chinu 2, it becomes an even more effective lineup. For me, China was a no-brainer. You can go straight to a 5.7 lineup with an M18 or an M64, followed on with a T3485 and an M36. Easy peasy. Toss in a Hong Kong T34, and you've got a lineup that's really, really effective at a BR where it should do some good stuff. Italy's a rough one for me. I don't have a lot of lineups that I really enjoy lower tier. But I think I found one that should be a lot of fun and still have lots and lots of options. Now, mine's based around the Obel 74 HVG, but there is a great R3T106 FA right there in the tech tree that you can use instead if you don't have this event vehicle. Now, the Obel 74 does have APFSDS, but it's not the most effective around. It's just an inky-dinky 60 millimeter gun. And so you really lose some penetration ability. But this R3T106, you got those Heat FS, Heat FS grenades going out there. Awesome. Good piece of equipment. I like them both. Pick the one that works best for you. OF40, I've got a great win rate on still, and you can never go wrong with an M47. This BR definitely cries out for the R3T20, so you're not jumping quite so high in BR. Good lineup. France ends up in an interesting place, and while there's probably higher BR options that will be even better, you let me know in the comments what you think. I found that I liked the 4.3 based around the AMX 13 DCA 40 with the follow-on AMX 13 FL11 to be to my liking. Tossing an RL 44 and an M4A4, and you've got a pretty good lineup that should be able to get you some good win rates. So that's my choices for France. For the oddest of the batches, if you happen to have been doing events for a while, such as Operation Summer 2020 and the Export Order event, you've got an entire lineup of 3 vehicles that you can throw backups on, all under 2.7 that all qualify for the event. The L62 Anti-2 is a rank 3 vehicle. The other 2 are rank 2 and rank 1 respectively. But at 2.7 with the top lineup, you are really having a good time there because you're going to be one of the best on the battlefield. That said, if you're not having that as your setup there, then I'd go to the 5.7 lineup again with the Stridswagen 74, followed by the Panzerwagen M43 1963. Good vehicles, both of them, and you've got some great other options here, like an AA gun here, and you could back it up with an IKV 103. So good 4-piece lineup there at 5.7, just barely stepping down each time. So good choices there. And finally, for Israel, I have no recommendations for you. I've got exactly one tank. That is the beginning tank, the M51, and it's not even spaded yet. but you might have some great lineup options in here, especially if you get around the 7.7 range, where some of their better kit tends to come in. You let me know if you've got an Israeli lineup you think is the bomb, or at least not gonna be bombed, and in the comments below. And that is really everything I know. Now I didn't go into naval because naval's not my specialization. I've got some naval ships. I might try it, but I don't have any good recommendations for it. If you have lineups that you like there, also let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give me the old thumbs up. I hope to see you in War Thunder soon. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in War Thunder, the new summer quest event.